Veganuary 2024. Very happy new year to you all. This morning it is me, Bev Turner, and Ben Leo with you. Good morning, Ben. Great to see you. Right, countries around the globe brought in the start of 2024 with huge firework displays. London Mayor Sadiq Khan finished his display with the message, London, open to everyone. Does that hit the right note for you?
Possibly not. Our Southwest reporter, Jeff Moody, is enjoying a traditional cold water dip. Jeff, are you mad? And have you got your kit off yet?
My kit is staying very firmly on. Nobody wants to see my moves at this time of the morning, I tell you. But there are lots of people, literally just about any second now, to leap into the sea. I would say there's around 200 people here. They're all lining up. They're all ready to go. Some of them are in fancy dress outfits. There's people dressed as mermaids here. It's all raising money for the St Margaret's Hospice, a really, really good, important charity down here in Somerset. But as we can see, I'm going to turn the camera around a little bit so you can see what's going on. And they're literally lining up right now, and they're about to count down so we can watch these very brave, foolhardy people who are spending their New Year's Day. Here we go. 3,
Here we go.
2, 1. Here they go.
And if you're listening on the radio, there are probably 100 people or so, mainly in swimwear, running towards the sea to work off those hangovers. Look at that. That is the British eccentricity right there, isn't it? Quite a few of them wearing bobble hats and gloves.
Yeah, take the hats off. It's cheating.
Also, this morning, it was breaking just a little while ago. Japan has issued a major tsunami warning following a series of strong earthquakes that have hit the western parts of the country. Residents have been urged to evacuate. Have a look at the impact as it hit.
Terrifying. We'll have more of that as the show develops, but closer to home, childcare commotions. Should parents stay at home to look after their children, or should the taxpayer help with childcare? Conservative MP Miriam Cates is whipping up a storm over this. She talks to us at the top of the show.
And next, Tory leader. Well, a poll by Conservative Home finds that Kemi Badenoch is the top of their Cabinet League table and the panel's Minister of the Year. Do you agree?
And the 5-minute fix. New research suggests more than 1 in 5 GP appointments last year lasted only 5 minutes or less. Is that good enough? I suspect not.
Get in touch this morning, gbviews at gbnews.com. We're going to tell you in just a minute what we thought of Sadiq Khan's firework display in London.
Interesting, wasn't it?
Very controversial, as always. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you did last night. We want to hear from you. It's the start of 2024. This is going to be a massive political year. How many elections around the world?
40 elections, not least in the US and, of course, closer to home here.
Yeah.
Is Donald Trump going to keep an eye on a looming Starmer administration here? And also elections coming up in India and other places all over the world.
Yeah.
So, big one to come.
gbviews at gbnews.com is the email address, as always. First, though, here's your very latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good morning to you. It's 4 minutes past 10. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB Newsroom. Coastal areas in Japan and South Korea have issued evacuation orders after an earthquake triggered tsunami warnings. A 7.6 magnitude quake hit the Noto area of Japan at approximately 7 a.m. UK time. Japan's weather agency has warned residents in the area to evacuate immediately to higher ground. The South Korean government's issuing similar advice for neighbouring coastal areas, warning of waves that could be as high as 5 metres. Russia's launched 90 drones at Ukraine in the hours leading up to New Year's Day. Ukraine's Air Force says Moscow launched a massive combined air attack with drones and several types of missiles. Moscow's reportedly used hypersonic, cruise and ballistic missiles too, which are harder to intercept. Speaking yesterday as the war against Russia approaches a third year, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is becoming stronger. British forces are prepared to respond to cargo ship attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK won't hesitate to take direct action to protect the key shipping route. The Iran-backed Houthis have targeted merchant ships, citing support for Hamas in its war with Israel. The US Navy recently said it sank 3 rebel boats that had been targeting a container ship in the region. Average household energy bills will now be almost £100 more expensive. The energy regulators increased its price cap by 5% in response to rising wholesale prices. Households are urged to submit meter readings to their supplier as quickly as possible to ensure they're charged correctly. Ofgem says it's made it clear to suppliers it expects them to identify and help those struggling with their bills. New restrictions on visa routes come into force today as the government attempts to tackle net migration. Now, only foreign students or postgraduate or government-sponsored courses can bring their family over. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, says the new ban will prevent people from manipulating the system and will reduce migration by tens of thousands. However, critics say it will hit universities which rely on foreign student fees and could also harm the UK's reputation as an international destination. Now, junior doctors are being urged to call off what will be the longest strike in NHS history. The NHS Confederation says the 6-day strike, which starts on Wednesday, will put patients at serious risk. Health leaders say industrial action will leave hospitals, GPs and other services skating on very thin ice and highly vulnerable in what it says is often the busiest week of the year for the NHS. The planned strike will amount to 144 consecutive hours of industrial action, the longest in the 75-year history of the health service. There are calls for mandatory eye tests for older drivers as the number aged 90 or above has doubled in 10 years. A record 153,000 Britons in that age group held a full licence in November. That is due to the ageing population and fewer older drivers giving up their licence. Well, the AA has called for drivers to be required to show evidence of regular eye tests to carry on driving once they reach 70 in an effort to improve road safety. Labour's pledge to ensure British produce will make up 50% of food in schools, hospitals and prisons. The party seeks to woo rural voters ahead of the general election likely next year, or maybe this year I should say. Labour says it would use government buying power to back agricultural businesses. Sir Keir Starmer is also planning to sign a new veterinary agreement with the European Union to boost exports. Consumers will no longer pay VAT on period pants from today, following a 2-year campaign. Women will save up to £2 on period pants on average. There was previously a 20% tax, as they were classified as garments rather than sanitary products. Around 50 retailers wrote a letter to the government calling for the removal of VAT. Countries around the world have been celebrating the start of 2024. More than 100,000 people watched the fireworks in central London, the biggest display in Europe. It began with the bongs from Big Ben and the words, "London, a place for Europe," lit up by drones for the crowds lining the River Thames. Now, it was a similar story in Edinburgh, with fireworks lighting up the castle for the 30th official Hogmanay celebrations in Scotland. Elsewhere, iconic landmarks across the world were lit up with around 1 million people gathering near the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge. Residents of the Pacific nation of Kiribati were the first to see in 2024. This is GB News. We're live on TV, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker too. That's it for the moment. I'll have more in about 25 minutes' time.
It's the Bev and Ben show this morning. Very good morning to you. Happy New Year. I hope you've had a lovely week. Have you had a good week?
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah. I've had a great year, actually. 2023 was superb, I must say.
And I'm hoping that you all have a wonderful 2024 as well. Stay with us this morning until 12 o'clock while you recover from your New Year's celebrations.
Yes. Did you catch the fireworks in London last night to welcome in the new year? Let's take a little look at what happened.
Of course, it has all become a little bit political, like everything these days. And London Mayor Sadiq Khan gave his message at the end of the fireworks. Let us show you what he said. He said, our unique combination of fireworks, drones, lighting and music have put on a fabulous show for the millions watching around the globe, sending a message of unity and showing why London is the greatest city in the world. He went on, as we move into 2024, I feel more inspired than ever to continue our work towards building a better, greener and more prosperous city for everyone, blah, blah, blah. And this is what the fireworks spelt out at the end. The message during the display said, London, a place for everyone. Now, I asked Twitter if that hit the right note. Ben, Leo, what do you think?
I think that's half the problem, isn't it? London is a place for everyone. I mean, that is precisely probably why it's falling into complete despair. Knife crime up, knife point robberies up, no one can get houses. I've said before long on this channel, and I've always got some stick from it from the Londonites that live here, but I think London at the moment is a little bit of a pit, if you don't mind me saying so.
It's not very nice down here. I can't lie. I'm very envious of you, people that don't live in London at the moment. The streets are dirty. The cars are... The roads are packed. Look, we had... 2022, we had net migration of 745,000 people. Let's just remember. The year before the pandemic, 2019, that number was 184,000.
So it's sitting the size of Birmingham every 2 years, when you haven't got the infrastructure to handle it, the schools, the surgeries.
That's right. 8 million people on the NHS waiting list. I will remind you, Sadiq Khan. Housing shortage, as Ben said. Not enough school places. And some areas of the country are basically monocultures that are very different to how they looked 20 years
Khan
ago.
actually was grilled before those fireworks last night. Someone said to him, you know, knife crime's up, robberies are up, violence is up. And he said, well, you know, it's something about mobile phones, people want mobile phones, this and that. And the presenter said to him, well, look, West Midlands crime is down, Manchester crime is down. You can blame Tory governments and funding, whatever else, but it just doesn't pass.
And also, you know, bear in mind that he also told everybody that you had to take your photo ID to the fireworks. Now, why would that be?
I thought that was racist.
I thought, well, why was it racist?
No, having ID is racist. He said that if you need ID for elections, as some people want, that's a racist procedure.
That's what... I'm glad you clarified that, Ben.
Yeah.
But yeah, why do you need your photo ID? To go to a fireworks display. Anyway, right, moving on. Let us know what you think. GBViews at GBNews.com. Sir Keir Starmer's party is reportedly looking at creating new nursery places inside primary schools to help parents manage childcare.
Yes, Conservative MP Miriam Cates took to Twitter to say the following, that a tweet has been viewed more than 2.4 million times. She said, Labour's plan for babies, 6 months with mummy or daddy, if you're lucky, then handed over to the state so mummy and daddy can get back to the critical national endeavour of generating GDP. Has anyone asked if this is best for children? Well, I'm delighted to say Miriam is with us now. Good morning, Miriam. Happy New Year to you. Congratulations on a sterling tweet that caused quite the controversy. I'm not sure why. You say that Labour's plans for nursery places is actually a sticking plaster to a more wider problem. What do you mean by that?
Well, both major parties are engaged in what I've called an arms race now on childcare, which is this competition to provide more and more free childcare places to parents. Obviously, people think it's a vote winner, and it may well be. But the problem that both parties are trying to address is the cost of living for families, which is a very real problem. And we now have a situation which wasn't so much the case a generation ago, where it's almost impossible for most families to survive on one income. And that means that when children are small, so under 3 or before school, it's almost impossible now for many families to choose for one partner to not work or to work part-time and provide some of that care themselves. They have to go back to work. Now, there are several problems with that. First of all, it's not what people want. The polling consistently shows that most parents would prefer to look after their children more themselves in those early years. Remember, those early years are very, very short. But also, it is just a sticking plaster because it is not solving the cost of living problems, which are not to do with childcare and are to do with tax and housing and many other things.
The CSJ did a bit of reporting into this, didn't they, Miriam? A bit of research, and it showed that 78% of parents with children under 5, as you were just saying, would like to spend more time with their children if they can't afford to. And a really shocking, striking, maybe not shocking, but striking 81% said that they felt it was more important for a government to help parents to stay at home for longer with a new baby rather than facilitating a rapid return to work. It is very commonsensical, and we're all parents. You have 2 little ones, Ben. My 3 are teenagers, and Miriam, you have 3 as well. We've all grappled with this. It's so controversial, though. How has it become so controversial to say it'd be quite nice if one of the parents had a bit more time at home with their baby?
Well, that is a really good question. And obviously this tweet got 2.5 million views, and it wasn't because people were supportive, shall we say. It was because it was controversial. And I think the heart of the matter is that it is very difficult now to say that it is a good thing for parents, maybe mothers in particular, to spend a lot of time with their infants. Now, remember, we're talking about under 2s here, so small babies. Of course, it's different when children get to 3 or 4. Of course, it's developmentally good for them to spend some time away from parents and get ready for school. Nobody's arguing that. There's a reason why the 15-hour offer for 3 and 4-year-olds has such great take-up. It's a good idea. But it's very different for under 2s. And if you look at the research about what's good for children under 2, it doesn't seem clear that long hours in institutional childcare is good for babies. In fact, it's probably bad for babies. But it's very controversial to say that in an environment where so many families just have no choice. They might not want to put their baby in nursery, but they just have no choice. And so this is the angle that we need to tackle. How do we give parents that choice? Because we know it's best for babies and we know it's what parents want. But I think some, particularly on the left and particularly on Twitter, have this idea that it doesn't matter who looks after a baby and all adults should be able to go out to work if they want. Now, of course, they should be able to go out to work if they want, but that's not what all adults want. And we should be interested in addressing the reality and not some thought experiment about what's best for families.
And Miriam, actually, it's funny because the most vocal people on this issue, and some, who have been trolling you in recent days, in actual fact, I tend to find that the majority of them don't have kids at all. So they'd never get it and they'd never understand that important early years connection between infant and mother or infant and father. They just don't get it because they've not got kids. It's quite as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been following the trolls too closely, but there is something in that. And I think, until you have a child, you can't imagine the bond that you feel. And it is an instant bond that most people feel once that child is born, particularly for women, obviously, because of the hormonal aspect, the fact that you physically carry this child. And you do feel incredibly protective of this child. You don't want to leave it for a long period of time. So there are really good biological reasons for that. It's absolutely key to a baby's survival that it has that kind of protection.
Sure.
But there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing unfeminist about that. It's just biology.
Miriam, you're in a bit of trouble at the moment. The Parliamentary Standards Committee are investigating you, and I'm just going to stick my neck out and say it's because they don't really like strong-minded, opinionated women who are swimming against the tide of current public opinion within their party. Is that what's going on here?
I'm not allowed to speak about this at all under the conditions, I'm afraid.
OK, well, I've said it for you. I've said what I think is going on, then I'll just say it for you. And then one last question. When are we going to have an election, Miriam Cates?
Well, I think it has to be this year, doesn't it? There seem to be bets on May and bets on October, November, but I honestly don't know. I don't have the inside track on that, I'm afraid. OK, well, look, good to see you, as always. Happy New Year to you. Keep up your great work. I think you're fighting all the right fights for all the right people. So we really appreciate you meeting us this morning on New Year's Day.
Yeah, seems to be one of the last few remaining Conservatives in the Conservative Party, I would argue. But, yeah, we move on. As we welcome in the new year, many of you may have taken part in a cold water dip this morning. So let's go live now to our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody. Apparently, Jeff, you're a bit too chicken to get in the water this morning in Minehead. It's very good for you, Jeff. You'd come out feeling like a new man, physically and mentally reviving you.
Come
I know,
on.
you're right. I should have done. And now they've all done it, I do kind of regret it. I mean, it was over quite quickly, and apparently it's warmer in there than it is out here. But let's talk to someone that is a bit braver and a bit less chicken than me. Misty, congratulations to you. How did it go?
Oh my God. I mean, the trepidation of going in, first of all, is absolutely incredible. You're just so frightened because today in particular the waves are quite large. But once you're in, it's absolutely amazing. The thrill, although there was fear as well, when the wave hit me. Well, it actually hit my friend, and she then tumbled and then hit me, so it was like the domino effect of going over. But you come out and you're like, yeah!
Ready to face the new year.
Oh my God, yes. And what a new year it's going to be. It's going to be absolutely fantastic.
Right, let's bring in Hayley. Hayley, you're from the hospice, St Margaret's Hospice. So what are people raising money for today?
So we are here raising money for the hospice. People like Misty and all our other fabulous participants that have taken part today have raised so much money for the hospice. For every 5 people that have gone into that water, we've raised enough to pay for 1 hour's care for 1 patient in our inpatient unit in Taunton. So every little helps, and they're all incredible for taking part because it was chilly in there.
Fantastic. So you think I should have done it then, Misty?
Definitely, and next year you will, with us, please.
Would I?
Yes.
Next year?
We'll be back next year.
OK, you heard it there first. Next year I shall be going in the water.
Yes, you will, Jeff Moody.
Good man.
I have a saying in life, Jeff. You never regret an outdoor swim. You never regret it. You don't want to do it at the time, but you never regret it. Now
OK,
messed
I'll
up,
take
you
your
haven't done
word for that.
Go on, go and borrow some trunks. The day is still young, Jeff. Someone will have a spare pair of swimmers you can put on. He's not convinced.
No, he's pretending he can't hear you now. So here he goes.
Hold the line, ladies and gentlemen. He's going to find some trunks. This is going to be trunk watch we're now doing this morning.
Man.
Oh, what a lovely sight there down in Devon. If you're listening on the radio, Jeff has run off to go and find.
I don't want to appear virtuous, but I took a cold plunge last night to welcome in the new year, and there's nothing better than just getting drenched in ice cold water. You feel alive. You feel,
invigorated.
Please, I recommend it.
Right, still to come this morning. Japan has urged residents to evacuate immediately after a 7.6 magnitude earthquake struck the central region. We're going to have the very latest on that.
Yeah, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Very good morning and a happy new year to you. It is January the 1st, of course, 2024. We made it, Ben.
Happy New Year to you.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We're both here this morning, obviously Ben and Bev. It's Ben and Bev's show. And with a bit of breaking news this morning, there was an earthquake that hit central Japan with a preliminary magnitude of 7.6, triggering a tsunami warning as residents were urged to evacuate.
Yes, joining us now is meteorologist Jim Dale. We'll get stuck into the earthquake first of all.
Good morning.
What's going on in Japan? Is this going to be worse than Fukushima in 2011? Let's just be
frank. Have to watch the space because it's only just happened in the last couple of hours. So pictures are coming in. Look, they're on the Asian plate for this kind of event. So it's not. I'm going to put this in the right way for Japanese people. It's not. A massive shock, surprise. These things happen from time to time.
Just to be clear, that the footage we're seeing there, that's actually the next story. That's about a weather destroying a wind turbine. That wasn't Japan. We'll try and bring you the pictures of Japan. This has only just happened this morning.
So this is a low impact, when I say low in terms of depth of earthquake, which tends to be more catastrophic. But as I say, these things have a knack of, and as you will find out on this programme today, of coming out in other words, it takes time for the casualties, for the damage to come to fruition to see what's actually gone on. But 7.6 is right up there.
And so this quake, Jim, which has happened offshore.
Yeah, just about, apparently, yes.
And so what we're now hearing is that obviously the impact and the vibrations of that can then cause the tsunami to build.
That's correct. And if it's nearer into shore, tends to be that the tsunami tends to be of a lower profile. If it's further out, it's got the fetch.
Which is what happened in the Maldives, famously.
Exactly. And, if you remember, take yourself back to Boxing Day, well, I forgot the year, but the Phuket one we were talking about.
Was it 2008, I think?
Thailand.
Yeah.
Why does it always seem to be that these events happen on sort of Christmas or New Year's? I mean, maybe it's just my perception of it, but it's just...
Well, it's pure coincidence, to be honest with you. They don't pick a moment where it tends... I mean, you think about it more because you remember Boxing Day, you remember New Year's Day. That's what it is, rather than necessarily it picking an anniversary date of any description. So yeah, but we'll wait and see. The Phuket one had such a geographic spread in terms of the tsunamis that happen right across the Indian Ocean into Africa. So you can see that where it happens, how deep it happens, is a big catalyst to
I think the authorities in Japan are saying they're braced for 16-foot tsunami waves. So unfortunately, that inevitably will mean a loss of life.
Probably so, sadly. And I'll just say something about earthquakes, about the climate, about weather. Humans are small when it comes to it. We are small. Mother Nature is far bigger, far grander, and can be far more destructive, as we're seeing now.
Talking of which, Jim, this is the video that we've just played you, if you're listening on the radio. This is a wind turbine that was torn apart by Storm Gerrit. The gales hit 85 miles an hour. It's in Ayrshire in Scotland. Now, Jim, we're told that wind turbines are the solution to our energy crisis. How is it possible that they can be blown off their propellers?
By the wind.
Yeah. Maybe it wasn't engineered in the way it should have been, constructed in the way it should have been. I can't say in every single case, but I do know across the Christmas period and leading up to New Year that wind energy actually was the top for the UK, topping 40-50% of energy requirements in the UK, which is a massive positive, and I want to be positive on this day, step in the right direction in terms of renewables and the direction of travel for green. Yeah, you're going to get incidents like that. They will happen.
Really?
Well, yeah,
How often?
they will.
You're being quite blasé about that. I don't really want wind turbines spinning off.
Equally, in terms of, say, an oil ship, a tanker, it's in the rocks and spilling all its oil. Those kind of things with the mechanisms that are involved will happen from time to time. And it isn't that you then go back to the start, ban everything and all.
So, Jim,
you don't do that.
Sticking with the climate, I'm not sure what's correct these days. Is it global warming, climate change, or global boiling now? Which civil liberties are we going to be asked to give up this year in exchange for taming the weather?
Do you know what? It's not about giving up. It's about moving in the right direction in terms of taking what's out there and grasping it and really believing that a cleaner, greener world is a better world.
Apparently last year was the hottest in 125,000
years.
Do you believe that? Really?
Well, it's not a case of whether you believe it or not. These are climatologists, far more, let's just say, far more educated than I am in terms of being able to come up with these figures. Now, that's come out of ice cores, tree cores, and the rest of it. But what we can say for certain, for absolute certain, Ben, is that the last 150 years, yes, 2023 was right at the very, very top of it. And all the things that you've seen in terms of, when I say climate catastrophes, not weather catastrophes, there is a difference, stem from that.
Can I just read you a few predictions from yesteryear? So in 2004, Mark Townsend and Paul Harris quoted a Pentagon report in The Guardian by saying European cities will be plunged beneath rising seas in Britain and it will be plunged into a Siberian climate by 2020. And in 2000, David Viner, I'm not sure if you know him, was a senior research scientist, he said within a few years, snowfall in the UK will become a very rare and exciting event. Children just aren't going to know what snow is. So when we have these headlines saying last year was the hottest in 125,000 years, how do you expect people to believe it?
Because it's true. And because
but those weren't true.
Well, no, of course, people do stab in the dark a little bit. Let's make that absolutely clear. Not every prediction, especially at this time of year, comes true. And we've got to accept that sometimes scientists get it wrong occasionally, and people will then nitpick about those predictions. But the whole predictions of what's going on in terms of the heat, and not just the heat in the atmosphere, but the heat in the oceans, the loss of ice, particularly around Greenland and Arctic, they're all coming true. I'll say this, and I'll make a little prediction for you now, if you wish.
Don't do it, because you inevitably might be proved wrong.
I don't care, because I really, this is my job. This is what I have to do. I'm a predictor at the end of the day. That's what weather guy does.
Come on, Mystic Meg, what's going to happen?
OK, so Mystic Mystic Jim in this case, says that 2024 will be just as catastrophic in terms of the events that we've seen in 2023, not necessarily in the same place, but with what we've got in terms of the emissions that are carrying on and the temperatures that we're now seeing, it will be just as catastrophic as 2023. Watch the space. I've had an extremely busy year, and I'm pretty sure I'll have the same in 2024.
This time it's different.
It's different, yeah.
Jim Dale, meteorologist, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Still to come this morning, a new year means a fresh start for many of us, with 66% of people apparently setting New Year's resolutions for 2024. Have you got any, Ben?
I don't like setting them because I think if you're going to do something, just do it on the day. So, yeah.
Me too.
No.
The only thing I will commit to is I want to work hard, play hard, look after my relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all that matters.
Can't ask for much more than that.
No, relationships with your parents, your siblings, your kids, your partners, your co-presenters.
I'd like to go to the gym a bit more and find some time away from kids and work. But anyway, we're going to go to the news with Aaron with all the latest headlines. See you in a sec.
It's 10:33. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Japan has issued a tsunami warning with evacuation orders for coastal areas after a massive earthquake. Japan's weather agency has warned residents in the area to leave immediately and find higher ground. Big waves have already begun breaching the shores, with the threat of crests as high as 5 metres possible over the next 24 hours. South Korean and North Korean governments are issuing similar advice for neighbouring coastal areas. The tsunami threat comes after a 7.6 magnitude quake hit the Noto area of Japan at approximately 7 a.m. UK time. The number of channel crossings in 2023 has fallen by more than a third compared with last year. The last crossings of the year took place on the 16th of December, when 55 people made the journey from France in one boat. Bad weather conditions, though, have prevented further attempts. The provisional annual total for the year is more than 29,000. Average household energy bills will now be almost £100 more expensive. The energy regulators increased its price cap by 5% in response to rising wholesale prices. Households are urged to submit meter readings as quickly as possible to ensure they're charged correctly. Ofgem says it's made it clear suppliers are expected to identify and offer help to those struggling with their bills. And new restrictions on visa routes come into force today as the government attempts to tackle net migration. Only foreign students on postgraduate or government-sponsored courses can now bring over their families. The Home Secretary James Cleverly says the new ban will prevent people from manipulating the system and will reduce migration by tens of thousands. Critics, though, say it will hit universities, which rely on foreign student fees, and could also harm the UK's reputation as an international destination. We'll be back with more at the top of the hour, or there's more right now on our website, gbnews.com.
Coming up after this quick break, a new poll suggests that Kemi Badenoch is the front runner to be the next Prime Minister. Could you get behind her?
I think she's a bit of a Gove super fan. He backed her campaign and she backed him in 2019, so yeah.
I quite like her. When you actually listen, I've seen her talking in real life as well, not just on the telly, and I have to say, I do like the fact that she says what she thinks.
Well,
she doesn't really
Andrea
mind.
Jenkins called her recently the, quote, great pretender. So there's question marks whether she actually is centre-right, whether she's just kind of like a bit of a centrist as per Gove. So I'm not too sure.
Let us know what you think. And if you don't want Kemi Badenoch to lead the Tories, who do you want to lead them? And what are your political predictions for 2024? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10:40. You're with Ben and Bev on Britain's Newsroom here on GB News. Happy New Year to you. Let's get stuck into some emails, shall we? One from Wendy. Good morning, Wendy. She says, if you cannot afford childcare, perhaps you cannot afford to have children. I know this will be an unpopular view, but children are a responsibility, not a right. I used to think that, Wendy, but actually our plummeting birth rates worldwide has kind of changed my perspective on that. I think we just need to have kids wherever and whenever possible.
Yeah. And you've got two little ones, haven't you?
Yes.
Kirsty says, I feel that those who revive carers allowance should have half their benefits increased to somewhere halfway between the benefit and the minimum wage. I think this is because we're talking about, Miriam Cates was suggesting, of course, where does the state, what should we be doing for parents or carers, really, of looking after children? Anthony said 6 months of childcare with parents at home makes it more difficult for parents to then get back to work. And Kevin says childless adults' views should not be gaslit. Well, look, it's a really controversial issue. The reason it's so controversial as well, of course, is that for decades, feminism has been arguing, I was one of those people, that women should be going back to work as soon as they've had a baby. But nobody really talks about the fact that men could do some parenting just to help that balance a little bit.
Well, I was telling you earlier, Bev, off air, how a couple of holidays we had last year, my partner, my wife now, and I, and our children, every bloke I met and we befriended on those holidays said that they changed probably no more than 2 nappies in their lifetimes. And that had me feeling kind of like, am I being mugged off here? Because I do my fair share, to be honest. But
and all the research shows that parents, men, fathers, who have good quality time with their children, but also able to fulfil their career ambitions as well, are happier. And we want happy husbands. You know. So let us know your thoughts. Keep them coming in. It's about balance, isn't it? Sharing the responsibility and having choice and freedom to choose. Right. We are joined now by former Labour MP Simon Danchuk and the Director of Jail Partners, Scarlett Maguire. The other Scarlett Maguire, not the one that was on breakfast. I do love the fact that there's 2 of you. Right, let's talk about some of the big issues of the day both. Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Does it feel like New Year's Day? Does it feel like New Year's Day?
It does, actually, because I went out last night, so it
got
feels...
a
little bit.
Get some water to this man, please.
Scarlett, did you have a late finish?
Late-ish.
Not too late. Not too late.
Well, you're both still here, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, we're very grateful. Right, next Tory leader, Conservative Home. A poll by Conservative Home. Let's go to you, because it is polling, Scarlett, and this is your specialism. Kemi Badenoch is top of the league table to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. By how much? How popular is she?
Yeah, she seems to be very popular with people who vote in the Conservative Home poll, so these sort of Conservative grassroots voters. And it's quite interesting. I mean, her profile took a sort of massive boost, and her popularity ratings as well, with that leadership contest in 2022, the one that Liz Truss won. And then she's had a good year. I mean, I think in some ways it's been James Cleverly, we saw, was at the top of the table just a couple of months ago. He's now plummeted since he took over as Home Secretary. He's made quite a lot.
Made the Rohypnol joke about his wife. That might not have helped.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the fact that there's even so much interest in this story is incredibly telling, because it means that people are already moving on from the idea of Rishi Sunak as the sort of Conservative leader, as Prime Minister, which probably shows the sort of trouble that he's in.
Do you know what would be nice, Simon, is if the Conservative Party chose a leader that was chosen by the members and not throw it back in their faces, a la Boris Johnson, Liz Truss?
Yeah, well, because Conservative members of Parliament have a big say in this, don't they? So, the polling is interesting. I'm surprised that Penny Mordaunt comes second in this, actually, and Suella Braverman is in third place. I would have thought she was more popular, Suella Braverman.
Mordaunt was a surprise.
Yeah, Mordaunt's a surprise. She's very moderate Conservative, very much centre of British politics. I'd have thought Suella Braverman would have done better. I think Kemi is very competent. What the Conservatives need to do, in my opinion, is be more conservative, and that's not what they've been at the moment, and that's why they're struggling in the opinion polls.
Scarlett, why don't they get that? It's obvious to a lot of Tory members and right-of-centre voters, but this lot, in government at least, just don't seem to get that. Why?
I think every political party, every mainstream political party struggles, or by that I mean the sort of two ones, to straddle their base and to the sort of centre of the electorate, which they do need to win round when it comes to an election. I do think that, I mean, we've also seen stories about Rishi Sunak consulting Dominic Cummings on some of his ideas, but actually, for some of it, he was on something which is bold ideas and bold actions, I think, on specific policy areas, namely, NHS, immigration and taxes, well, income, cost of living, and we've just not seen it, so it's hard to see who he is trying to appeal to.
When do you think the election is going to be? Can I ask you? Because that, for me, is the big issue of this year, and when that election is will determine so much of the next 10 years of this country.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky. There's no good time for them to go. I think they've not helped themselves with the speculation that it might be May, because now if they don't go May, it will look like they're bottling it and they're running scared, which is not a good look with the electorate. And the more, people see general elections and stuff in headlines, in newspapers, the more people think, oh, maybe it is time for a general election, actually. And that, I think, will then become quite hard to sustain.
I think Scarlett's right. I think everybody's waiting for the general election now, aren't they? I suspect he might go into the autumn and see how well he does between then and now. But
that would coincide with the US election, wouldn't it, in November?
Good point, absolutely, yeah.
One of the dates
perhaps October.
Mooted is a week after the US election, which, I mean, it could work both ways. I could see the logic where I think some of it is that they want to try and they think the economy is going to get better. They think interest rates are going to come down, mortgages are going to come down.
Yeah.
They want people to feel the benefit of that first. It's just whether they can wait that long.
And also, if they wait until after the summer, we're going to get more boats coming over, of course, in the summer. But there might have been a plane takeoff to Rwanda.
Yes, hopefully, yeah. Well, that's the policy that everybody's hoping for. The majority of the public want to see illegal immigration coming down dramatically.
Can I just ask you briefly, both of you, we didn't have this on the list, but I'm interested to know, what do you think of Mayor Sadiq Khan's fireworks display last night, ending with London? Was it
London open for everyone?
He's desperate to win the next mayoral election, isn't he? I live in London. I'm not a fan of Sadiq Khan, to be quite honest. I think he's done the city no good at all.
Do you think London's gone downhill? So, short story, it used to be my dream to live in London. I'd go to Arsenal games at the weekend, I'd go to a drama class on a Saturday when I was 10, 11, 12, 13. It used to be my dream to live in Angel, of all places, for some reason. However, now I can't stand the place. I'm happy in Sussex by the sea. I only come here for work, and I hate the place. Ben. Simon, what has London, in your view, gone down in the last 10, 15 years? And in what way?
Well, I've lived in London since 2010. TfL, Transport for London, is not what it used to be. I take a journey on a daily basis, and there's always a problem with it. There's the crime levels have increased dramatically in London. So there's a number of issues that's occurred on his watch.
So his fireworks, I've just looked at it. It's London, a place for everyone, is what was spelled out in the sky. And yes, it's a very touristy night, right? It's a lot of people. I don't think there's anybody that lives in London actually goes to the fireworks in London on New Year's Eve. But I think your suggestion there, Simon, is that because he knows that he appeals to the multicultural vote and that London is predominantly Labour and that 71% of Muslims, British Muslims, will vote Labour. His fireworks was his electioneering, Scarlett.
Yeah, I mean, with his election, he actually underperformed, really. I know he won the last one, but he didn't win it anywhere near as well as people thought he was going to, especially against quite a poor Conservative candidate. And I think what you see is, so he struggles with outer London. He struggles, especially post-ULEZ. He's going to really struggle. Yeah. So he's doubling down on getting inner London votes.
Fascinating, isn't it? There's always something going on with him, isn't there? I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. Right, Bill Clinton, talking of people you might not trust, he's going to appear, apparently, on the Epstein Island list. I mean, not really a surprise, is it,
I was just going to
Simon?
say that. I don't think anybody will be surprised by this fact. And it's concerning, though, isn't it? And how many people will be on there? I mean, it's worrying.
Have you all seen that that portrait that apparently was hanging in Epstein's mansion on the island of Bill in a dress and wearing red shoes? Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's not a conspiracy or anything, or, you know, reportedly it's an actual thing. It was found in his house. It's a portrait of Bill Clinton wearing a dress.
People will be Googling that now.
Well done. We might put it on the Twitter feed. But how damaging do you think this is going to be, Scarlett, this Epstein list, which, has, of course, was confidential? Jeffrey Epstein, let's just remember everyone, was sent to prison. Ghislaine Maxwell is there as well on the sex trafficking crime. Obviously, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, in inverted commas, in prison. This list is much sought after, but is it going to be as inflammatory as people think?
I think it could be. I mean, I think even Bill Clinton, there's obviously, there's been sort of stories swirling about Bill Clinton and any sort of associations with Epstein before. But I think even his presence on the list is sort of hugely significant and will just do more to undermine trust in these sorts of public figures, and especially politicians, actually, in America.
I mean, being on the island, though, doesn't necessarily mean that you've been involved in any sort of paedophile activity.
No.
You know, he was a wealthy Hollywood socialite and, you know, businessman. He would have invited all sorts of people onto his island. They might have just had a nice time there.
But, I mean, these are serious crimes, serious allegations, and Prince Andrew, for example, and others associated with him after he'd been found guilty of committing crimes. I mean, why would you do that?
Yes, that is very good point.
People like
That is
Bill
very good
Gates,
point.
who have met Epstein in the past when he was alive, obviously, his defence was, I had to meet him for networking opportunities. He was lobbying me for money for charity opportunities and things like that. So, as Bev said, it's not just because you flew there or you met him for dinner on the mainland in America. It doesn't necessarily mean you're part of a mass paedophile ring. But is that kind of defence, you know, just is it believable?
I mean, I think it depends which person you ask. So, you know, I think I'm sure we all do have to do a lot of meeting people for my job, a lot of travelling places, a lot of sort of networking, I guess. And there are some people I think that I wouldn't do that with, and I think, I think there is a lot.
Maybe it's very naive to think that, as you say, particularly once he was found guilty of these crimes, it's naive to think that the residents or the guests on his island wouldn't have known with whom they were fraternising. Anyway, that list, I think, is going to be released today. I think, is it later today? In the next few days.
I'd also like to know about Prince Andrew. He paid, of course, 12 million quid of his mum's money to silence his accuser.
Virginia Giuffre.
Is that money now up the wall because he's been dragged back into this list, which he's, you know, more than likely going to be named on?
It's not going to go away for him, is it? No. I mean, this is the reality of it. He's got a major problem.
And I guess and also, do you know what? As we're talking about this, it's occurring to me. It will be how many times people visited the island. You know, Bill Gates might get away with saying, yes, I went over once to discuss how much money we were going to donate to charity, and I went over maybe twice in a year. But if he was repeatedly on and off the island, what was the appeal?
Clinton flew on his jet, not to the island necessarily, but he flew on his jet 26 times.
26 times? That's quite a lot. Right, Home Office error may have mistakenly allowed thousands of migrants to stay in the UK. I mean, Simon, explain this to me. My mind is blown.
It's all to do with a stamping process that the Border Force have used in relation to migrants coming into the country, and it's allowed them to stay here indefinitely. I mean, describing the Home Office as not fit for purpose is an understatement. I mean, it beggars belief, to be quite honest.
Do you understand what's happened here, Scarlett? It literally sounds like it is as simple as a stamp in a passport, the wrong one has been used, that has allowed people to stay here because the wrong stamp was indefinite leave to remain, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it seems very astonishing and quite backwards, doesn't it? I mean, there's lots of stories. Apparently, Robert Jenrick was radicalised by his time at the Home Office because he was so surprised about what he found in there. But, I mean, no, it seems it sort of beggars belief, really.
Isn't this, Simon, just a damning indictment on this Tory government? Because not only can they not stop the boats, but as Bev alluded to earlier in the show, they are in control of legal migration, and the last statistics is in excess of 700,000 a year. A city the size of Birmingham. When you've got that, you've got the boats, you've got laughable stories like this where they're waving people through willy-nilly. Yeah. That is a stain, is it not, on this Tory government, for a so-called right-wing government?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're not very right-wing. I mean, the truth is that the Conservative government, and we've got this coalescing around the centre of politics, aren't we, whether it's Keir Starmer's Labour or Rishi Sunak's Conservatives, and they're all gathering in the middle. And that's been happening for a considerable amount of time. And the reality is they don't mind immigration, illegal immigration or legal immigration. And the truth is we've been letting people in, not just students, but students, family members as well. It's crazy.
Right, thank you both. Great start. Now, it is January the 1st, and that means that Veganuary is underway. A month of giving up any sort of meat products. I don't think you or I are on that list, are we?
Steak for me, please.
Let me know what if you are. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Stanell. Well, the first few days of the brand new year, unfortunately, going to remain unsettled. Going to see further spells of wind and rain for many of us. But out there, this first thing this morning, there is actually some sunshine to greet the new year, especially across parts of Wales and England, but it won't last. We're seeing further outbreaks of rain moving in from the southwest as we go through the course of the day. So I think come the afternoon, the far north of Northern Ireland, northeast England and Scotland will see the best of any sunshine. Still some showers up here and temperatures ranging between 5 to 7 degrees across the north, potentially up to 11 degrees further south. Into New Year's Day night, we'll continue to see this rain spread its way northwards. It will start to bump up into the colder air across Scotland, so we will see some sleet and snow, especially across the higher ground. Further south, a rather grey and damp night to come. Some heavy rain continuing across the very far south coast of England and accompanied by some strong winds. So quite a mild night for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, but further north across Scotland, we will see a touch of frost in places. So Tuesday really is going to be a wet day for a lot of the UK. We've got this band of rain and snow across the high ground across Scotland. Further south, heavy rain for southern England. But in between, we will see some drier and some brighter weather develop. But temperatures in the south, despite reaching around 12 degrees in places, factor in the rain and wind, it's not going to feel great at all.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you, Craig. Now, still to come with Bev and Ben this morning. Not Bill and Ben, a bit like that. There's an election here in the UK next year, a huge one, of course, in the US as well. We're going to be previewing all of those. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning and Happy New Year. It's 11 a.m. on January 1st of December 2024. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Ben Leo, and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. A Happy New Year. So Japan has issued a major tsunami warning following a series of strong earthquakes that have hit the western parts of the country. Residents have been urged to evacuate. Take a look at the impact as it hit. Bowling alley. This one is clearly a train station. All the signs shaking, terrifying stuff for the people there in Japan.
Elsewhere, countries around the globe brought in the start of 2024 with huge fireworks displays, not least in London, where Sadiq Khan finished his display with the message, "London, open to everyone." Does that hit the right note for you, I wonder?
And is going vegan completely nuts? The month where we're encouraged to try and go vegan for a month is upon us. Will you be doing that, or is turning vegan a big mistake?
Ah, very good, very good. And the next Tory leader, a poll by Conservative Home finds Kemi Badenoch top of their Cabinet League table. Our political correspondent Olivia Utley has more.
Yes, is Kemi Badenoch really the Tories' one last hope of redemption? The grassroots seem to think so, and Tory MPs are inclined to agree. Find out more with me very soon.
And too old to drive. The number of drivers aged 90 or over has doubled in 10 years, and now there are calls for mandatory eye tests. We're also going to be discussing the American election. Are you excited about that, Ben?
Buzzing, can't wait. I'm actually hoping, if any of the bosses here are listening or watching, I'm hoping to get sent over there to cover it. So
Great
I'm going to put my hand up.
Great
yes,
idea. Right, let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, the very latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Good morning, it's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. Japan's issued a tsunami warning with evacuation orders for coastal areas after a massive earthquake. The country's weather agencies warned residents in the Noto region near Ishikawa to evacuate immediately to higher ground. 1 metre high waves are already arriving, with authorities warning they could reach 5 metres in height in the coming hours. The North Korean and South Korean governments are issuing similar advice. The major tsunami warning comes after a 7.6 magnitude quake hit the central region of Japan approximately 7 a.m. UK time. A tourist who was snowboarding in Japan's Alps, Baldwin Chia, has described his experience.
We just experienced a 7.5 earthquake, pretty massive if you ask me. So the whole room was shaking, the TV was shaking. I had to keep everything on the table. I did feel safe in my room though, but everything else was shaking. I didn't receive any notifications of that, so I think it should be fine. But definitely, it is quite scary.
The number of channel crossings in 2023 has fallen by more than a third compared with last year. The last crossings of the year took place on the 16th of December, when 55 people made the journey from France in one boat. Bad weather conditions since then have prevented any further attempts. The provisional annual total for the year is just over 29,000. British forces are prepared to respond to cargo ship attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK won't hesitate to take direct action to protect the key shipping route. The Iran-backed Houthis have targeted merchant ships, citing support for Hamas in its war against Israel. The US Navy recently said it sank 3 rebel boats that had been targeting a container ship in the region. Average household energy bills will now be almost £100 more expensive. The energy regulator has increased its price cap by 5% in response to rising wholesale prices. It comes into effect today, so households are urged to submit meter readings as quickly as possible to ensure they're charged correctly. Ofgem, though, has said it's made it clear to suppliers that it expects them to identify and help those people who are struggling with their bills. New restrictions on visa routes come into force today as the government attempts to tackle net migration. Now, only foreign students on postgraduate or government-sponsored courses can bring over their families. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, says the new ban will prevent people from manipulating the system, and he says it will reduce migration by tens of thousands. However, critics say it will hit universities, which rely on foreign student fees, and could also harm the UK's reputation as an international destination. Junior doctors are being urged to call off what will be the longest strike in NHS history. The NHS Confederation says the 6-day strike, starting on Wednesday, will put patients at serious risk. Health leaders say industrial action will leave hospitals, GP surgeries and other services skating on very thin ice and highly vulnerable in what is often the busiest week of the year for the NHS. The planned strike will amount to 144 consecutive hours of industrial action, the longest in the 75-year history of the health service. There are calls for mandatory eye tests for older drivers as the number aged 90 or above has doubled in the last 10 years. A record 153,000 Britons in that age group held a full licence in November. It is due to the ageing population and fewer older drivers giving up their licence. The AA has called for drivers to be required to show evidence of regular eye tests to carry on driving once they reach 70 to improve road safety. Labour's pledged to ensure British produce will make up to 50% of food in schools, hospitals and prisons. The party is seeking to appeal to rural voters ahead of the expected general election later this year. Labour says it would use government buying power to back industrial businesses. Sir Keir Starmer is also planning to sign a new veterinary agreement with the EU to boost exports. Well, this is GB News. We're live on TV, digital radio and on your smart speaker too. That's it for the moment. And now it is back to Ben and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 11:07. Happy New Year
Happy
to
New Year
you.
to you.
How's your hangover? Hope you're enjoying your bacon butty on the sofa with us this morning. You've been getting in touch. Thank you so much for emailing us. It does prove that some people are awake, actually, at 11:07 on New Year's Day. John in Birstall has said, I don't want any Tory. We're talking about the general election, when it might be, what will the result be? John says, I've given them my vote for the past 20 years and they've broken every promise.
I'm hearing that everywhere, you know, from a lot of Tory voters. Disillusioned. In actual fact, they're not just voting elsewhere, they're just not voting at all.
Yeah. And Trevor has said the only chance they've got, this is the Conservatives, is to create an alliance with the Reform Party and make Nigel the leader. Now, the Reform Party have got a big announcement coming up, I think. Is it today? It's in the next...
Well, I saw Tice over the weekend and I was trying to get him to spill the beans, but he wouldn't know. He's tight-lipped.
Well,
Nigel for leader?
Maybe. I mean, how would that play out? Obviously, he did well in the jungle, but Nigel Farage still comes with a certain shock reaction to a lot of people. They have a reflex reaction to Nigel Farage. They don't like him and they don't actually listen to what he says. So it's a risk.
I think Richard Tice is great. Ben Habib is also great, but some people over the weekend were saying Nigel would be the only person to really cut through that red wall seat, the electorate, just like Boris did. But remains to be seen.
Julie has said that. The leader of our country definitely needs to be Nigel Farage. He's the only person that talks sense. I don't think there's ever been a bigger gap between the people running the country and the people who are actually living in the country. I don't think there's ever been such a big disconnect.
Well, I was saying to Scarlett a minute ago on the panel that everybody knows what the solution is for the Tories to hang on to power. We all know, just control immigration and behave, you know, mildly conservative, but they just don't do it, and I don't understand why. It's their voters. They're trying to appeal to people who are never going to vote for them.
Low tax, the individual at the centre of your decisions, decent NHS, decent schools, decent roads. It's a pretty low bar, really, isn't it? It's not
a lot to ask for.
Anyway, many people around the world have been celebrating the arrival of 2024.
Yeah, tens of thousands of people filled the streets of the capital to watch the fireworks display overnight as the city declared itself a, quote, place for everyone.
GB News' Sophie Reaper reports.
The New Year's party began around 13 hours before it reached the UK, with the likes of New Zealand the very first to break out the bubbly. A couple of hours later, the celebrations reached Australia, with fireworks lighting the sky over the iconic Sydney Harbour. The start of a brand new year. As midnight struck around the globe, the party moved over to East Asia. China, Japan, Taiwan and Malaysia rang in the new year. The festivities were quickly joined by the rest of Asia as midnight began to strike in places like Thailand, Nepal and India. 4 hours before the clock tolled midnight here in the UK, the celebrations in Ras Al Khaimah in the United Arab Emirates saw not one but 2 world record attempts. As a showcase of over 1,000 drones and aquatic pyrotechnics dazzled the onlooking crowds. Then, with not long to go on the UK countdown, it was Europe's turn to enter 2024. And then, finally, it was our turn. As Big Ben struck 12, its famous bells were heard across Britain's airwaves 100 years after they were first broadcast. The celebrations commenced as people here in the UK welcomed in the start of the new year. The 1st of January always brings a sense of new beginnings. No matter where we are in the world, a new year marks a fresh start. And if the celebrations of last night are anything to go by, well, 2024 is already off with a bang. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
How lovely. Now, as we enter January, we've stepped foot into Veganuary.
Yeah, this is the month where we're all encouraged to try a vegan lifestyle. To tell us why this is a good idea, we're joined now by Donica McCarthy, Director of the Climate Media Coalition. Good morning to you, sir, and Happy New Year. Come on then, convince me. As a steak lover, why should I ditch the red meat this January?
Well, I think it's a great month to celebrate the gifts of vegan plant-based diets. Many reasons. First of all, health. Your risk of cancers, heart disease, diabetes go down significantly with a plant-based diet. Secondly, it's a third of the carbon footprint of a meat-based diet. And most importantly, for most people in Britain who love wildlife, it takes only around, it's estimated, a vegan diet takes around a quarter of an acre per year. For a meat-based diet, it's 10 times that. So the amount of land it takes away from wildlife to feed this meat-based diet is absolutely disastrous, and has left Britain the most nature-depleted country on earth. Sorry, 7th most depleted.
What about the poor bees in California who are almost being wiped out to produce gallons and gallons of almond milk for vegans like yourself? The bees are almost extinct in California.
Absolutely. The use of pesticide across the planet, most of which is used to grow crops for livestock, is a disaster for our soils and a disaster for our bees. And so we need to move away from using pesticide to organic food, as well as moving away from meat-based diet. I mean, you're absolutely right. The almond orchards in California are terrible. Most people in the UK, the best meat is British-produced oat milk.
Donica, right. There is a growing body of... Lovely to see you again. Always like our conversations. Happy New Year. There is a growing body of evidence to suggest that most of the protein, all, I would say, of the proteins, the vitamins, the nutrition that we need is contained in animal products. We are cave people. We are meant to survive off animal fats, milk, eggs. Some people are even now arguing that plants and fruits and vegetables aren't necessarily that beneficial to us, but we could live a much healthier life with a stronger immune system if we eat solely animal products. And this idea of the heart attacks if you eat meat, that's much more complicated, isn't it? It's not just because you eat meat. It might be because you also happen to be a smoker and you eat loads of carbohydrate and you have a kebab on your way back from the pub. Not just eating good, wholesome, possibly organic, but not necessarily animal products.
Well, I have to say, you starting off the year with a laugh from me, Bev. I have been accused as an environmentalist of being a cave dweller for years. And now you guys are telling us we need to be cave dwellers. I mean, hey, how can we win? No, but to address your serious point, I think Britain is a country of animal lovers. We love wildlife.
We love to eat them too.
But the actual amount of land, 70% of land in the United Kingdom is used to produce livestock.
Beautiful.
Abroad, a land area the size of the United Kingdom abroad is used to produce meat for the United Kingdom. What does that mean? It means a devastation for our wildlife. We have lost, I'm 64 years old. In my lifetime, Bev, we've lost 70% of the wildlife that's on the planet.
You look a bit older. That's what being a vegan does to you.
That's not very nice to say to somebody on New Year's Day. You look lovely. And I mean that genuinely.
That's all that meat I eat, Donica.
However, if you love wildlife, you will love a plant-based diet. When my father was born, we've lost 95% of the wildlife in our oceans around the United Kingdom since my father was born. We can't continue the way we are and hope to have wildlife for the next generation.
But Donica, isn't that a farming problem and an industrial farming problem, not the problem with meat itself?
No, most 65% of the land in the United Kingdom is devoted to pasture for sheep and for dairy and for cows, not industrial farming. I can't remember the exact amount used for land for livestock, but for feed. The other problem, of course, with feeding industrial livestock is that it's using soya, which we're demolishing the Amazon to feed to our cows. So that's insanity.
Listen, I'm thinking about my fridge right now. I don't know about you, but I do know about you. But I don't know about you, Ben, but I've got a lot of cheese left over from Christmas. I've got some ham still. There's some sausages still in the freezer we didn't get round to. What did you have for Christmas dinner as a vegan?
Nut roast.
I had a delicious butternut squash and carrot pie. That was absolutely delicious, with roasted potatoes and boiled Brussels sprouts with delicious sour cream, vegan sour cream.
Donica,
vegan sour cream.
I can only talk about real-world experience. Your Christmas dinner sounds lovely, by the way, but from my experience, the vegans I know are some of the unhealthiest people I know. When you go and buy vegan food in the shop, it's some of the most processed junk going. All these fake meats and these fake animal products, super processed. Worse for you, I'd argue, than a nice
sugar.
organic grass-fed slab of steak that's been looked after and seasoned well.
I think you're correct at the point of processed food, whether it's meat or whether it's vegetarian, is not brilliant. Natural foods is where we need to be going. And actually, the trend this year has been to move away from the false meats and more towards a plant-based natural food. So you're right, processed foods are great, but actually, if you're talking about processed foods, it's processed meat is a real cancer problem. Processed meat is a real cancer danger.
We probably agree on that. We always find something to agree on, don't we, Donica? The healthy and handsome Donica McCarthy there, with whom I look forward to having many more spas in 2024.
You're trying to make up for your New Year's insult.
I know he's got things. Excellent. Right, now, moving on. A poll by Conservative Home has suggested that Kemi Badenoch would be the favourite to succeed Rishi Sunak as Conservative leader, with 38% of respondents naming the Business Secretary as their preferred minister.
Yes, here to break down the results for us is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, good morning and Happy New Year to you. Is it going to be a Happy New Year eventually for Kemi Badenoch, perhaps?
Well, it could well be a Happy New Year for Kemi Badenoch eventually. This is a poll from Conservative Home, led by Paul Goodman, a sort of grandee Tory activist. And because it's a poll of Conservative members, it's often very accurate in predicting the result of a Conservative leadership election. Last time there was a poll like this in Conservative Home was the summer of 2022, and it put Liz Truss in first place to succeed Boris Johnson, followed by Rishi Sunak, followed by Penny Mordaunt. Of course, when it actually came to a leadership election, those were number 1, 2 and 3 in that order. So this is very good news for Kemi Badenoch. Of course, we're not expecting a leadership election before the general election. What most people in Westminster are expecting are the Tories to lose the election and then for Rishi Sunak to step down. At that point, the Conservatives are going to have to find a figure who is capable of uniting what is already a factionalised party, and after a general election loss will be even more factionalised. The whispers in Westminster at the moment are that Kemi Badenoch is the only person to take on the job. She has a lot of support from Conservative MPs. She's managed to build up her reputation among the right wing of the party. She's been very bold and brave on gender issues. She was the driving force behind stopping that gender self-ID legislation in Scotland. She's spoken out about gender self-ID in schools, but she's also pretty popular with the left of the party. As Business Secretary, she has taken a pretty cautious approach to Brexit as a Brexiteer herself. She was opposed to that bonfire of Brexit legislation that was being proposed. She wanted to take things more slowly and more cautiously. And on the whole, she is emerging as perhaps the figure who will take over from Rishi Sunak. Behind her in that poll from Conservative Home was Suella Braverman and Penny Mordaunt, but they were only on 13% and 14% of the vote each. So at the moment, it seems that Kemi is the front runner. If she makes it into that role, though, it is going to be a really uphill struggle.
Isn't it? Olivia, thank you so much. Olivia Utley there, who did a brilliant job over Christmas, as did you. You were on the telly a lot on GB News, as was Olivia.
Yeah, thank you.
Right,
Give you a fiver later.
Yeah, well, I was at home in my pyjamas. Right, still to come this morning, it's not just here in the UK where we're preparing for an election. There is a huge American presidential election later this year.
Yeah,
You're excited about it, aren't you?
I'm absolutely buzzing.
He's pitching for the job. Not as president, but as reporter for GB News.
I'd probably do a right job at that as well, let's be honest.
We should both go. Right, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:25. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Bev Turner.
Thank you for joining us, and a happy new year if you're just rolling out of bed. Now, 2024 is set to be a very busy year in the world of politics. It will culminate in the 60th US presidential election, which takes place on November the 5th.
And despite the many ongoing cases against him, Donald Trump, of course, is widely tipped to win the Republican nomination as he seeks a return to the White House, meaning a Trump-Biden rematch is very much on the cards.
Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis has said that he would pardon Donald Trump if he beats the former president to the White House, citing President Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon in 1974.
Here to talk us through all the runners and riders is Greg Swenson, Chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Greg, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Are we nailed on for a Trump-Biden rematch? I mean, this situation with Colorado and Maine maybe puts a spanner in the works. So should we establish, first of all, if Trump is going to make the national ballot?
It looks like Trump for now. And I think Biden less likely, because I think when we get to June or July, when the conventions start, I think the Democrats will look at the polls, and if Trump is polling comfortably ahead of Biden, which he is right now, then I think they'll pull Biden. They'll do the Bernie Sanders trick on him.
So who would replace Biden? Gavin Newsom, or there's been some talk maybe even Michelle Obama could be...
I've heard both. I think Michelle Obama obviously has name recognition, and I think she'd be a great target for the right. I think Newsom would be a better candidate in terms of his governing experience, although he's governing California, which he's doing his best to run California into the ground. So I think he'd be a good opponent for the Republicans. So it's really a question of who's got the name recognition, but also who's got an organization. But this is not going to be like 1968, where LBJ bailed out in March of '68 because he didn't do as well in New Hampshire as people expected. It was a different process back then. Only 13 states actually had primaries that mattered. Now it's basically all 50 states. So there's just no time for a proper process. So I think the Democrats will wait until the summer to pull Biden.
I'm fascinated by this relationship between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump because, of course, Ron DeSantis wants to beat Donald Trump to be on the ticket, but of course he can't say anything too bad about him because the Trump fans are so loyal to Trump. They need to know that Ron DeSantis is one of them. Is that why he's come out and said he'd pardon them?
It really is. He's in a tough spot because his supporters are very similar to Trump's supporters. So it's the same type of electorate. The never-Trumpers and the rhinos and the moderates, they're going for Nikki Haley or even Chris Christie. Whereas, Governor DeSantis is trying to get the same audience that Trump has. So it's a delicate balance. It's hard. And basically, Ben, you mentioned Trump is leading the charge in spite of the indictments. It's actually because of the indictments.
Galvanizes them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, they were basically tied in March of last year. So in March of 22, CNN had DeSantis up 2 points over Trump. In the other polls, they were around tied or maybe Trump by 5 or 10. That's a small margin that early in a primary process. Once the indictments started, Alvin Bragg, last March, April, 4 indictments, the mugshot, and now you have these states trying to, which is pretty reckless. They know it's not going to work. First of all, it's Maine and Colorado. Who cares? There's not that many elections or electoral votes there. But also, then the big states have actually supported his name on the ballot, notably California, but even the big upper Midwestern states. So this is not going to work. If anything, it's elevating Trump again, just like the indictments. Well, they want Trump to be the candidate.
Yeah, even Trump's fiercest rivals in the race for the Republican nomination, Chris Christie, who you mentioned, they've come out and said this is just an affront to democracy. So even they're on his back, got his back.
Really
with DeSantis, very quickly, he could do no wrong a year or so ago. Did he make a mistake by running in this election? Shouldn't he have just waited and become, the 2028 nominee? Or...
It's a great question, but I think he had to run this time for 2 reasons. One is he's got political capital. I mean, to have that kind of midterm electoral victory in November of 22 and not run with that kind of momentum, it would be really political malpractice. Secondly, Trump is very vulnerable. We don't know what is going to happen to Trump. So I think being even number 2 is important because anything could happen. He's 78 years old. He could trip and fall. Yeah. He could go to jail. He could actually start to lose some support if he gets some convictions. I think a quarter of Republicans won't vote for him. So there's some real challenges.
What would a Trump presidency mean for the UK if and when we have a Labour government? How would he work with?
I think it would be better than the Biden administration, that's for sure. Remember, Trump is a supporter and a fan of the United Kingdom. He had a very good relationship with the country. Biden has done his best to sever that relationship. As we know, Biden is much more favorable to the EU, to Ireland specifically.
He thinks he's Irish, doesn't he?
He's got a chip on his shoulder, which is kind of odd.
Wait, who knows what he thinks? I don't think he thinks the same thought any hour of any day, does he? How's Robert Kennedy doing? Independent candidate now, potentially could massively split the vote.
Absolutely, Bev, because this is the first time maybe since 92 when Ross Perot took 20% of the vote. First time since 92 where you have a meaningful third-party candidate. Now, usually they play spoiler by winning 2 or 3% of the vote. That can make a difference. Like Ralph Nader in 2000, basically gave George W. Bush the election by getting just 2 or 3 points in Florida. But if you look at most of the time, third-party candidates just don't move the needle. This could be different, especially given how unpopular both Biden and Trump are. They both have, 15-point negative ratings. They're both polling around 40 in terms of favorables. That's really bad news. 75% of Americans don't want them to be the candidates.
And the interesting thing about Robert Kennedy, of course, is that he was traditionally a Democrat, obviously, but they don't want him because he's been so anti-lockdown, pro-freedom, which very much appeals to the right. So he really does appeal to both demographics.
Absolutely.
Doesn't he?
He might pull as many voters away from Trump as he does Biden.
Yeah.
The Democrats hate him because the Democrats are the party of lockdown. They're the party of vax mandates and mask mandates and keeping kids home from school.
Everything that he opposes.
He had no chance in the Democratic primaries because the inner circle really despises him, even if some of the people like him.
Did you wake up this morning, Greg, and go, yay, it's 2024, we're going to have an American election this year?
It's going to be a huge year, as we know.
I did.
Yeah, I mean, elections everywhere. 49% of the world residents are going to be in a country with an election.
Yeah.
I think the U.S. will probably be the most controversial, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, Greg, great to see you. No doubt we're going to see quite a lot of you in the next 12 months. OK, 5-minute fix. New research suggests that more than 1 in 5 GP appointments last year were 5 minutes or less.
Yes, all that and much more after your morning news with Aaron.
It's 11:33. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Japan's issued a tsunami warning with evacuation orders for coastal areas after a massive earthquake. The country's weather agency is warning residents in the Noto region near Ishikawa to evacuate immediately to higher ground after a 7.6 magnitude quake. Tens of thousands of people are without power. 1 metre high waves are already arriving, with authorities warning they could reach 5 metres in height in the coming hours. The South and North Korean governments are issuing similar advice. It is the first major tsunami warning in Japan since the devastating earthquake of 2011. An official from the country's meteorological agency gave this update earlier.
A major tsunami warning is in effect in Noto, Ishikawa Prefecture. We are currently observing people near the shoreline and riverbanks. Please evacuate to higher ground. Please be cautious of further earthquakes up to Shindo 7, highest rating on the Japanese seismic scale for the next week, and in particular for the next 2 to 3 days. This is the first major tsunami alert since the earthquake that occurred in the Pacific Ocean on March the 11th, 2011.
Well, the number of channel crossings in 2023 has fallen by more than a third compared with last year. The last crossings of the year took place on the 16th of December when 55 people made the journey from France in one boat. Bad weather has prevented further attempts. The provisional annual total for the year is more than 29,000. Average household energy bills will now be almost £100 more expensive. The energy regulators increased its price cap by 5% today in response to rising wholesale gas prices. Households are urged to submit meter readings to their supplier as quickly as possible to ensure they're not overcharged. Ofgem says it's made it clear suppliers must identify and help those struggling with their bills. Well, I'll be back with a full bulletin at the top of the next hour, or you can get more right now on our website, gbnews.com.
Still to come, driving licences. Holding people by age 90 or above... Sorry, I'll start that again. It's been a long morning. Driving
You've been
licences,
working very hard this Christmas. I've had a lot of days off.
Slog. Driving licences held by people aged 90 or above have doubled in the last 10 years. There are now calls for mandatory eye tests. I can't disagree with that. To increase road safety. Is this just common sense? This is Britain's Newsroom with Bev and Ben on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Very good morning. It is 11:39. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Bev Turner. Happy New Year to you, 1st of January 2020.
Happy New Year. Now, in a significant intervention, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the UK is considering airstrikes on the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels.
Shapps has said he wanted Britain will not hesitate to take direct action over their attacks on cargo ships in the Red Sea. So we're joined now by Defence Editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Good morning, Robert. Thank you very much for joining us, particularly on New Year's Day. This is a really significant turn of events. Just explain to us, if you wouldn't mind, what's going on and why it really matters.
What's really going on, there's been now 24 attacks on major commercial shipping in the Red Sea and the area, and that concerns between 12 and 15% of global maritime trade. It has been linked by the Houthi rebels to the events in Gaza, and they say they're attacking the shipping because they're proxies or supported by Israel, of which that is a very thin link in most cases. Britain and America have been discussing how to stop these attacks by drone and very sophisticated Iranian missiles from the Houthi rebels since before Christmas. Now, as of the weekend, the attacks have got much worse, with a very serious attack on a Danish-Singaporean ship bound from Suez to Singapore, missile and assault boats, which the Americans retaliated against. They've got to discuss how to stop them, and the discussion has been maybe they will even have to bomb the Houthi bases on the Yemeni mainland, and that would involve the British and the Americans and very likely the French now.
Robert, I don't mean to put a downer on the new year, but we've got potential confrontation, or indirectly, with Iran. Last night, President Xi Jinping of China said that reunification with the, quote, motherland Taiwan was a historical inevitability. Is 2024 shaping up to be very high risk on the geopolitical front?
Yes, and I think it links to your previous discussion about elections across the world. Actually, it's about 60% of all nation states are going to have some kind of nationwide election. I'm sorry to correct your contributor. Now, this is the kind of thing that we're discussing, the various confrontations, which are 4- or 5-fold, including Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, which is what people running the elections really don't want. And the mischief makers, the great disruptors from China through to Russia and Iran, sense that, and that's what's going to go on. What I suspect is that security and defense will come into the electoral agenda in a way that many political leaders, including the leaders of the two principal parties in UK, never really wanted.
So if we start to hit these ships in the Red Sea, the Houthi-controlled vehicles, and as you say, their base is also in Yemen, will Iran see that as a direct provocation of that country? And would they necessarily take action against us?
Bev, you're absolutely right. Iran is the key to this, and why they are prosecuting and promoting the Houthis is actually far from clear, because they've made some really extravagant claims, like they want to control or demand a say in how all commercial shipping is run in the Eastern Mediterranean as a whole. And there have been a lot of attacks on bases by Iranian proxies across Syria and Iraq. And in 30 of those bases, there have been British military personnel. This is why we've seen counter-strikes. And the latest thing, as of the last few hours, an Iranian gunboat, an Iranian destroyer, they call it, it's actually a frigate, I think, has appeared in the choke point of the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb. We know there are Russian ships, naval ships there, and Chinese naval ships. And they're not coming to the aid, deliberately not coming to the aid of the very vulnerable international shipping, like the Galaxy Leader, which you're now showing. It started with the Galaxy Leader, by the way. It was taken into port. The crew of 25 mixed nations have been kidnapped. And yesterday they announced, this is the Houthi rebel junta, said they are taking over the Galaxy Leader. So the Houthis and their Iranian backers are ratcheting up at every turn.
Gosh, thank you, Robert. It's terrifying, actually. It's an awful note to start the year on, isn't it? But beautifully explained. Thank you so much, Defence Editor for Evening Standard, Robert Fox, there. That is the situation that is going to cause potential chaos.
Quite concerning about the arrival of the Iranian ship. That's certainly an escalation.
OK, let's bring in now former Labour MP Simon Dunchuk and Director of the Jail Partners Scarlett Maguire. Just want your reaction on that, really, if we can, before we start, because this isn't on the front pages of the papers, I don't think, at the moment. It's been bubbling away, as Robert said then, from before Christmas. I've been roughly aware of it. I think we've been sleepwalking a bit about the significance of this.
Yeah, and I think Grant Shapps intervention in the newspaper saying that they're going to take action is the right one. And the consequence of this is that these ships are now avoiding the area. They're carrying goods on trade between countries. And one consequence is that it increases costs.
That's right.
For the public. Because they're avoiding the area, they have to go around Africa. Yeah. It costs a lot more to transport the goods. So this is a real cost of living crisis issue as well as a military issue. So I think Grant Shapps is right to make the intervention that he has, and I think we have to take action. I'm quite hawkish on this issue.
Are you? Scarlett, we also heard then from Robert about how this will play out with elections. How significant are military, how is military action in election years for governments?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw with the Ukraine war, we're seeing this again, the potential for sort of wars abroad to have repercussions back home, and even if you're not directly military involved. We saw that with Ukraine wreaking havoc on supply chains and energy bills. And as soon as it starts hitting people in the pockets, as soon as things might get more expensive, they can have quite unpredictable consequences on elections. And people can respond in different ways. Some people will sort of double down and say it's important, that this is why it's important that we up defence spending, that we sort of take more action on this. But then quite a lot of other people, and you see quite a lot of this in America, especially with the Republican base, start retreating and start saying, well, this is exactly why we shouldn't get involved. So it'd be quite interesting.
Which is actually a stark contrast to what it was, for example, in 2001 after 9/11. Bush, of course, pretty much won election based on the fact that, you know, it was a patriotic invasion of Afghanistan and, you know, defending America.
Yeah, but what you're seeing here is the Middle East issue, Israel,
and Hamas escalating and widening the issue. But I think that's more reason for the US and the UK and as Robert Fox said there, and France to clamp down on it and take immediate action to contain the situation.
Right.
Should we move on?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's go on to 5-minute GP appointments. Story in the Daily Express. So, research commissioned by the Lib Dems shows that more than 1 in 5 GP appointments last year were just 5 minutes or less. That's a recipe for disaster, isn't it, Scarlett?
Yeah, it seems really bad. And I think, you know, this is even before we have the doctor strikes that are about to start again next week, the longest ones in history. State of the NHS, I think, has been under-commented on in the last few months, especially given how upset people are about it.
Yeah. It's a huge vote issue, this, isn't it, Simon?
Well, let me say, I take a slightly different view. I think this is the Lib Dems trying to be relevant. So they've commissioned this research, and it shows... I don't want to visit the GP.
They're still not.
No, they're still not relevant, that's right, yeah, they're not doing very well in the opinion polls, and they've commissioned this research, and it doesn't show anything that surprising in my view. I don't personally want to spend that much time with my GP if I can help it, so 5 minutes is probably long enough.
You do hear these stories of misdiagnosis or missing the diagnosis at all. You're not concerned that you're not getting a proper check-up and they're just trying to hurry you out the door?
Yeah, there's probably some truth to that, but I have to say, you know, the less time you can spend in the NHS, the better is my view generally.
Although I do think there are a lot of people who are seeing their GP, that might be the only point of contact they get, and especially when social services are sort of through the floor. It's sort of they can be a real safety net to pick up on other problems as well that might be going on, and I think you're not really going to get that in just like a 5-minute conversation.
Having said that, I would rather they're seeing a doctor face-to-face for 5 minutes than a 10-minute chat on Zoom. Where you can't have your blood pressure taken and they can't look in your throat or do any, you know, I think that human contact
And also, it's argued that our crippling excess deaths problem in this country at the moment, and around the world, by the way, is down to people not visiting their doctors or getting appointments during the pandemic, amongst other things.
Absolutely. Right. The number of people over 90 with a driving licence has doubled in the last 10 years. I personally think that's cause for celebration. I like the elderly to still be independent. But are we doing so? Should we be taking more checks, do you think, Simon?
Well, I think the AA are saying in this point is that they need to make more checks on eyesight, and I think it's a valid point, isn't it? But the number has radically increased. The number of, I think it's 155,000 who are now over 90 who have a driving licence.
Good.
Scarlett, somebody just told me off on email. I said, yes, we need to have a look at these elderly people with driving licences. Someone's just emailed and said, Ben, you're an idiot. Most of the accidents happen amongst younger drivers.
Well, I'm actually quite embarrassed. Maybe I'm less embarrassed now because I can't drive at all. I've never had a lesson. So I feel like I'm too old to not be able to drive. But that also means I'm not doing any dangerous.
Why have you never got round to it? You just don't fancy it?
I grew up in a city and then I went to university in a city and I now live in a city, and it just never... I was never very interested in it.
I think, and do you know what? I think when you start to get a bit elderly, well, 90 is clearly quite elderly, and you're getting behind the wheel of the car, you've got to hopefully, Simon, have family that might say, you know what, Dad, like, you know, draw a line under it now, or...
But it's such a lifeline for people. As soon as you lose that licence...
That's an interesting point that somebody's made to you, Ben, that older people are more cautious and sensible drivers rather than... And it's true, you see younger drivers speeding around Rochdale or wherever else,
looking at the phone, don't even get me started.
There has been an argument in recent times of raising the driving limit from 17 up to something like 20 when you're a bit more mature. Would you consider that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm past 20, but I think that would...
So, Rishi Sunak has been accused of spectacularly poor judgment over the secret Dominic Cummings meetings. What's this all about? Whenever you hear the name Dominic Cummings, you think, oh, no, what now?
I know. Why would he do this? I just don't get it. And, you know, this idea that Dominic Cummings is this election hero that can win voters over, I think is an absolute nonsense. And so why he would even have a dialogue with this guy is quite beyond me. I find it puzzling, to be quite honest.
What do you think he's playing at, Scarlett? Why would Rishi Sunak want to meet up with Dominic Cummings, who is popular with no one?
I do sort of think the fuss over it is a bit overdone. I think, you know, when people are in Rishi Sunak's position, they meet a lot of different people for ideas. I think meeting Dominic Cummings to see the sorts of things he might suggest is sort of is definitely one thing. And actually, I think some of his ideas potentially around electoral strategies could be worth listening to. I think he himself has been very tainted since Barnard Castle and since some of the other stuff that's gone on. But I think if you can divorce him sort of personally from the stuff that he was suggesting...
I mean, he was tainted by the things he did himself, let's be honest, by his own poor judgment.
Yeah, it's poor judgment in that way, but I do think this is sort of a lot of fuss over maybe not that much, given that, you know, he's not actually working with him.
I can't remember who it was, but a Tory MP this morning tweeted, I won't name them actually because it might get them in trouble, especially if I get the name wrong, but they tweeted that it was always the plan for Rishi to replace Boris. Cummings was behind it, and now we're just seeing the latter stages of a plan that was devised all those years ago, or last year, when Boris was ousted.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I mean...
I think can I say it was Zach Goldsmith?
Yes,
it was Zach
Goldsmith.
Yeah. It was Zach Goldsmith who basically made that accusation publicly on Twitter last night, so we're not betraying any confidence.
I'm a fan of Zach. I think he was a really good politician. And it's interesting, I mean, Boris still has many supporters within the Conservative Party, there's no doubt about that, and would like to see him come back.
But see, sorry, Ben, go on. I was going to say, what Zach Goldsmith was criticising, he actually said the Tory grandees are not as clever as they think.
Yeah.
The idea that there are people pulling the strings behind the scenes who are, as I said before, very much removed from the British public and therefore might be making the wrong calls at the head of the Tory party.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if there has been any string pulling, it's not been going very well. Any plans that have been in place have not been very coherent, and, you know, even if they have got that far, they've been very poorly acted upon, so it's quite hard to see sort of any actual proper plan.
And interestingly, Goldsmith added to that, he said Labour could barely conceal their amazement and glee that their rivals were so easily manipulated. The party, the Tories, will need to use this well-earned time on the opposition benches for some serious reflection, which echoes the calls of the likes of, say, I don't know, Aaron Banks, that the Tories just need complete wipeout in order to rediscover themselves and, you know, what they're about.
Labour are enjoying all of this, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're keeping really quiet, saying very little in terms of policy, and hope to just take power later this year. I mean, that's
by doing nothing, and I don't think they can be quite so complacent. Right, thank you both. Simon Dunchuk, Scarlett Maguire, lovely to see you. That's it from Britain's Newsroom. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with just Emily Carver this morning. Emily, what have you got coming up?
Yes, just me. A very happy new year to everyone at home, and to you, of course, Bev and Ben. Coming up on the show, skating on thin ice. That is what NHS leaders are warning as we face another 6-day walkout from junior doctors. How can we put an end to these strikes? How can we put an end to the industrial action? And Japan has downgraded its tsunami warning in that country. We'll find out what exactly that means. All of that coming up after the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, the first few days of the brand new year, unfortunately, going to remain unsettled. Going to see further spells of wind and rain for many of us. But out there, this first thing this morning, there is actually some sunshine to greet the new year, especially across parts of Wales and England, but it won't last. We're seeing further outbreaks of rain moving in from the southwest as we go through the course of the day. So I think come the afternoon, the far north of Northern Ireland, northeast England and Scotland will see the best of any sunshine. Still some showers up here and temperatures ranging between 5 to 7 degrees across the north, potentially up to 11 degrees further south. Into New Year's Day night, we'll continue to see this rain spread its way northwards. It will start to bump up into the colder air across Scotland, so we will see some sleet and snow, especially across the higher ground. Further south, a rather grey and damp night to come. Some heavy rain continuing across the very far south coast of England and accompanied by some strong winds. So quite a mild night for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, but further north across Scotland, we will see a touch of frost in places. So Tuesday really is going to be a wet day for a lot of the UK. We've got this band of rain and snow across the high ground across Scotland. Further south, heavy rain for southern England. But in between, we will see some drier and some brighter weather develop. But temperatures in the south, despite reaching around 12 degrees in places, factor in the rain and wind, it's not going to feel great at all.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 12 o'clock on Monday, the 1st of January. A very happy new year to you. Now, skating on thin ice. NHS leaders warn that hospitals, GP surgeries and other services are in a highly vulnerable position. That's as junior doctors ready themselves for 144 consecutive hours of walkouts. Kemi for leader. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch is the favourite to become the next Tory party leader. That's according to a poll of grassroots Conservatives. And Japan's tsunami threat. Japan has downgraded its major tsunami warning to less serious for the Noto Peninsula. However, locals are still advised to stay alert as the aftermath of over 50 earthquakes that hit the area today continues. And a very happy new year to you. Let me know, what are your New Year's resolutions? Have you got any? Apparently most of us don't actually make any, let alone stick to them, but let me know what you're planning to do differently this year if you are. Perhaps a new hobby, perhaps you're going to be pumping some iron in the gym, perhaps something nice like giving people a compliment every now and again, reconnecting with old friends, family, reading more, spending less time on your phone. Let me know what you're going to be doing this year. That's a little bit different from 2023. GBViews at GBnews.com. But first, let's get the headlines with Aaron.
Good afternoon to you. It's just after 12 o'clock. I am Aaron Armstrong. Emergency services in the Ishikawa region of Japan are responding to at least 30 reports of collapsed buildings after a major earthquake hit the area. A 7.6 magnitude quake hit central Japan approximately 7 a.m. UK time. Now, no casualties have yet been reported, but a government spokesman says it's understood people are trapped beneath the rubble.
As of today, at 6 p.m. local time, there have been numerous calls to the emergency services, and we have confirmed several incidents of collapsed homes following the earlier earthquake. We will continue to make all efforts to gather information in order to identify all injured persons. The specific details are currently unclear, but we have received reports of 6 individuals trapped by collapsed buildings in Ishikawa Prefecture, with